Welcome into another edition of the Roar the Lions UK podcast, episode 344, coming down to the final furlong now. My name's Matthew Turner, alongside Ashley Soden. How you doing, man?
Doing good. Obviously, we've had a bit of a break from this for various events, but it's nice to be back talking the schedule and discussing our Lions. Even if we have to save pretty much all the good actual breaking news stuff for Monday, where we've got a bit more insight into OTAs. We leave that for now today. Focus on the schedule as we did last week.
Yeah, apologies for coming to you guys a bit later. I was busy on Monday, and then between us, we were busy Tuesday through Thursday, so it is Friday today, a bit later than planned, hence us being slightly out of kilter. But since OTAs, I think they finished today? I think?
Today's day 3, yes.
Yeah, so final day today. So the final kind of takeaways will come out today as a result of that. So we'll digest that over the weekend and then give some takes for you guys on Monday. As always in the live chat, if you have any questions, please get them in as we go to part 2 of the schedule reaction. And then we do have some listener questions from Ross Schuler, who submitted them via email. First ever person to submit mailbag questions in that way. Appreciate you, Ross. They were in detail, and we are going to give it the attention that it deserves. So thank you. If anyone else wants to do that, email address is in the YouTube channel description. So please do go ahead and do that. It's a great way to submit them to us in advance, or Twitter or what have you is always good. As always, just to start off, please do join us on our Discord channel. Great place to be all year long. Actually been very active this time of year, which has been great. So the link is in the live chats right now, and it's in the podcast description too. All right, college football podcast. Ant did give an update on that. He thinks that he's a couple of weeks away from coming back with that. So expect that mid-June time, where hopefully the conference breakdowns will be coming thick and fast. Please do like this episode and sub to the podcast. That really makes a difference to us, so thank you in advance for that. And go and support our friends at Lions Nation Unite, Herman Moore's project to bring the best in-Lions content creators together. And we're Twitch-affiliated, YouTube monetized. There's a tip jar in the description. Any support that way too, much, much appreciated. Thank you. News. We are staying away from OTAs to save all of that stuff for Monday, so here we'll just cover the rest of the news. And firstly, NFL owners have unanimously passed the motion to allow NFL players to take part in the LA 2028 Summer Olympics in flag football. The rules are unclear as to how many players are allowed, but it's presumed to be teams' international player pathway players if their nation qualifies, and one non-IPP player per team. And obviously, if there's a lot of teams represented, nations represented in one team, that's going to be a fierce battle to try and get in there if they're not IPP players. So, for example, Amon-Ra is not an IPP player, but presumably would qualify for Germany and America. So,
yeah,
that's going to be a fight, especially if we have someone else that could represent another nation. Surely we have a Canadian. We have many Nigerians and what have you.
We have many Nigerians and that, exactly, yeah. But as the resident flag footballer, I say, literally wearing at least the top half of my kit, I don't like it. Like, there's been a lot of discussion in the flag football world since this passed, because yes, there's some good to it. Brings eyes to the sport because obviously you bring in this whole NFL audience in. But what does it say to the male US team, which has been so dominant in the World Games, which is kind of like the World Championships for flag? They were up so much at half time that they flipped the teams. In the second half, offense was playing defense and defense was playing offense. That's how good the US team are. And yet you're basically sticking the middle fingers up to them saying, nah, you act what all this hard work you've done to really get us in this position. Fuck you guys. NFL players are going to come play. What does it say to them? And I know obviously there's all this, it's happened before, basketball and ice hockey, where you've had Michael Jordan and that bringing eyes in. But the good thing about that for them was you'd see them playing basketball at the Olympics, and then you could go see them playing basketball in the pros. With this, you see NFL players playing flag, and then, oh, wait, they're going to go back to playing contact. It's not really going to do much for actually promoting flag, like, in long term. It's just basically a money grab from the NFL to get more eyes on them, because people watch the Olympics. Like my mum always has the Olympics on, especially dressage for some reason. But she'll watch flag football because she sat and watched a couple of games with me. Like, oh yeah, look all this. It'll bring some eyes to the NFL, not so much the flag. And yeah, it really screws over the men's team. And it's a different discipline as well. Like, you're not guaranteed that Jameson Williams is going to go and play for the flag team and brilliantly. Gibbs might, because he's got the kind of skill set, short, fast, speedy, hip flat, like the hips twists and that. But Tyreek Hill, all these players, it's not going to translate as well. So there's definitely some good to it, but for me, it's a massive negative for the flag football community, and that's why quite a lot of them from other nations as well have been outraged, because it really benefits America. It's their home in their home one. It benefits them, benefits Canada as well, who obviously got some players like they've already signed a former Tampa Bay tight end to their squad now because of this. Like it really benefits the Americas who are already good, but just makes it harder for the UK teams, Norway, Germany, France, all these teams that over in Europe that don't really have those access to them. Suddenly they're going to get pushed to the wayside now.
Yeah. How many players in a flag team?
So you can, I think it'll be a squad of 10 at least, because obviously you have 5 starters on offense. You have QB, a center who is basically a receiver, snaps the ball back as a receiver, and then 3 wide receivers, or who could also play running back. And then you've got 4 DBs, traditionally 2 corners, 2 safeties, and then obviously a blitzer, which is what I do. So imagine a sort of, as it sounds, a blitzing linebacker that can drop in coverage, they can run defend, but mostly they're there to rush the passer and get to the flags before obviously to throw the ball.
There's 10 players, and let's conservatively say they have 16 teams qualify where they just have a straight knockout. And to be honest, they'll probably have a group stage and whatever, but like 16 is conservative. That's 160 players. Well, there's only 32 NFL teams. If there's a max of 2 players per team, 1 IPP, 1 non-IPP, it's only 64 players. So at least half of this very small event is going to be made up of absolutely flag players. But I really hope that the head coaches of the flag teams, even if they have someone from the NFL loaned to them, pick the players and the team based on merit. So like, if they have tryouts and they're legitimately better, fine, play them. Because at least then it's a meritocracy. If you're picking based on celebrity, then I think that kind of demeans what it is to be an Olympian. So I'm not against it, as long as the head coach, say, of the American team, but also all the other countries out there who have players who've been incumbents, if they get legitimately beaten out, like you would on an NFL roster, then they've won their place. I doubt that will happen, but we shall see. Anyway, Lions roster news. We have waived the linebacker Abraham Beauplan in favour of linebacker Zach Cunningham. Cunningham did have a reasonably solid career in the early part of it. Has fallen off a cliff after, I think, significant injuries, but you know, Beauplan came in and did well in limited reps, and we were both, I think, fans of his, but Cunningham maybe has a bit more prestige to him, especially when we're just looking for a count body right now.
Yeah, it's, as Eric quite rightly pointed out, I think it was on the mailbag for Pride Detroit, it's rotating linebacker 10 at the bottom of the depth chart. It really doesn't mean too much. I think it's a veteran head in there. Obviously, Riz covered him at the Texans, where he led the league in tackles one year. He's got that prestige to him, and he's got the veteran head that, he should be able to come in and compete in camp and maybe act as that green dot guy in the second, third, fourth team defenses. Because obviously the big news, I know we're not really touching OTAs, but with Anzalone not there, you need a veteran presence in that room. Cunningham would be that, and that's a good thing, especially since we do have a couple of like UDFAE kind of guys or second year guys. There's someone in there that they can bounce ideas off. So that's all it really is. Hopefully it doesn't mean too much for other players up the depth charts, long-term futures here. But yeah, sad for the Beauplan, because he did really show out last year in camp, and then when he signed him back and he played a couple of snaps towards the end of last season, he was decent. So sad for him, but he'll probably catch on somewhere else, because that always seems to happen now with our practice squad players. Who would have thought that a couple of years ago?
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing how far we've come as a team. It really does speak to how well we've drafted and how well we've developed players. All right, it is time to break down the second set of unique games. So the first episode of this week and a half ago, we looked at the first 7 unique games. Now we're looking at the second unique 7. Obviously, with the in-division games, there are 3 repeats. So 17 from 3 gives you 14. So we're going to zero in on the next 7 and the last 7 unique games, and I will be kicking us off with the November 2nd game versus the Minnesota Vikings, the first time that we will be facing them in this season, just after the bye, so that's advantageous in itself. The Vikings, obviously Kevin O'Connell head coach, and they've just re-signed general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah to a bumper 5-year extension. So, I mean, we can get into that and whether it was justified or not. But they were 14-3 last year. Their odds for the division are plus 475 in what many people have described as the best value odds in the NFL for a division winner. I think we could probably debate that at some point in the coming weeks and months in the dead space, but I have reservations about that. It's not that it isn't a good team, and we'll get into that in just a second. It's a very good team in a very, very good division, and actually I think there might be a 2-horse race elsewhere where the second horse is not is slightly better fancy, but I think it's probably better value. But anyway, getting away from that, they have had a very active free agency, both in and out. The headline for them, of course, is that Sam Darnold, after all the smoke about him getting the franchise tag, or maybe they'll just re-sign him, he was released. He was let go at the end of his contract. He signed with the Seattle Seahawks, which means that the Vikings are going with first-round pick from last year, J.J. McCarthy, who, of course, had a slight injury in preseason. It wasn't a catastrophic injury, as was reported potentially at the time. He should be absolutely fine to go. They don't think it's degenerative or anything like that. He should be a full go right now. So they are going with the youngster. They have enough belief in him that they didn't pay Darnold $33 million a year, which could be a bargain for Seattle. Who knows? So that's the big story for the Vikings. But otherwise, they have brought a lot of players in. 2 in the interior of the offensive line with Will Fries at guard from the Colts, 5 years, $87.7 million. And then Ryan Kelly, center from also the Indianapolis Colts, 2 years, $18 million. They also brought in Justin Schooler as depth on the offensive line in 1 year, $2 million. Otherwise, they went in on the trenches. Jonathan Allen came over from Washington, the defensive lineman, 3 years, $51 million. And Javon Hargrave from San Francisco, 2 years, $30 million. Eric Wilson, inside linebacker, came in 1 year, 2.6. And then otherwise, it's a lot of skill position players, especially on defense, with Isaiah Rodgers, a corner, coming in from Philly, 2 years, $11 million. Jeff Okudah, we know him well, 1 year, 2.35 from Houston. And Tavir Thomas, who I think was a Lion for a brief time as a practice squad player.
Tiny bit, yeah.
I think so. I don't know. Maybe I'm making it up. 1 year, 2 for him as well from Tampa. And then Rondale Moore on the other side of the ball. Wide receiver, former first-round pick, has obviously kind of not had the career he was hoping for, especially at Arizona. But he comes via Atlanta, 1 year, 2. They did also pay a bumper deal to re-sign Byron Murphy, who was out of contract. The number 1 corner, who had a very, very good year last year. 3 years, $54 million, so $18 million APY. That's a chunky bit of dough. But the reason that they had to do that is that they did lose quite a bit too. So after Sam Darnold, Cameron Bynum, the safety, signed a 4-year, $60 million deal with Indianapolis. Daniel Jones follows him, 1 year, $14 million to be the quarterback who may well get the start over there in Indianapolis. Patrick Jones, outside linebacker, 2 years, $15 went to Carolina. Cam Robinson, who they traded for last year, left on a 1 year, $12 million deal to Houston. Also lost center Garrett Bradbury, 2 years, 9.5 to the Patriots. Trent Sherfield, the wide receiver, 2 years, 6 to Denver. Johnny Munt, backup tight end, 2 years, 5.5 to Jacksonville. And following him to Jacksonville was Nick Mullins, the quarterback, 2 years, $4.5 million. And then as yet unsigned, Stephon Gilmore, corner, Shaquille Griffin, corner, Dalton Risner, guard, and Cam Akers, running back. In the draft, they didn't have very many picks, but they found time to stick at 24, despite everyone was suggesting they should trade out, to pick the offensive lineman Donovan Jackson. Their comp pick in the 3rd round at 102 was wide receiver Ty Felton, and then 3 day 3 picks. 5th round at 139 was defensive lineman Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, and then consecutive picks at 201 and 202 in the 6th round. Linebacker Kobe King, who a lot of people liked here, and tight end Gavin Bartholomew. Their needs were assessed to be running back, defensive tackle, and DB before coming into this. So they hit DT with Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. They did not hit DB and they did not hit running back. So that was per PFF in terms of what they thought they needed. And if you have a look at their roster, I think that was actually potentially well founded, because they do bring in players like Jordan Mason as running back depth, but it doesn't set the world alight. Ty Chandler is there too. But obviously, Aaron Jones is an absolute stud, so they'll be all right there. JJ McCarthy is going to be backed up by Sam Howell. They traded for him in the offseason from Seattle after obviously Seattle got their starter in Sam Darnold. For the skill position players, apart from those running backs, the wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Jalen Naylor behind them. The draftee, Ty Felton and Rondale Moore, as just mentioned. Tight ends, TJ Hawkinson, Josh Oliver, Gavin Bartholomew, Ben Urashek, and Bryson Nesbitt. Offensive linemen, Christian Darrisaw, Donovan Jackson, Ryan Nelson, Will Fries, and Brian O'Neill. With some good depths in there now, with Blake Brandel, who was, I think, a starter last year, now going to the bench. And then looking at the defense, the player base 3-4 with the front three now expected to be Jonathan Allen, Harrison Phillips, and Javon Hargrave. The linebacker 4, the outsiders, being Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. Inside linebackers Blake Cashman and Ivan Pace. The backup for those 4, Dallas Turner, Eric Wilson, Kobe King, and Bo Richter. There's also Brian Asamoah in there, who's obviously a former second-round pick. The back 5, Nichols, Byron Murphy with Tavir Thomas behind him. Outside linebackers Isaiah Rogers and Mekhi Blackman with Dwight McLaughlin and Jeff Okuda behind them. And then safeties Josh Metellus and Harrison Phillips with Theo Jackson and Jay Ward. Behind then, the punter is Ryan Wright. The kicker is Will Ricard, who obviously had a fantastic rookie season. And the long snapper, Andrew DePaula. Ash, they've been very active. Lots of incomings and outgoings on a 14-3 team. But for all the comings and goings, it really just boils down to one thing, which is how good is JJ McCarthy?
Yeah, and obviously the good news for McCarthy is he's coming into arguably the most QB friendly, one of the most QB friendly systems in the league now, because obviously you've seen what they did with Sam Darnold last year. I know obviously you were higher on him than me, in all certainty, but the fact they're able to win that many games with him on the center shows how good this system is for QBs. Obviously, it does help when you've got arguably the best receiver in the league to throw to, pretty damn good tight end, good running back to kind of keep the heat off you. But they did what they need to do in the off season in terms of the offense, shore up that interior offensive line, because just like other teams we've discussed last week and we'll discuss later, interior offensive line was their big weakness. So they shored that up, get first round pick, who people were saying if he fell to us at 28, he'd be in serious consideration. Get arguably, well, a descending sense, shall we say. I know Ryan Kelly was on the board to potentially be the first round pick if Taylor Decker wasn't picked. Taylor Decker, if he was picked, he would have been our pick. Kelly would have been our pick in that draft class. And then obviously Will Fry's done pretty damn good at right guard for Indianapolis. So they've shored that up. They've got Darrisaw back from injury, which should obviously help. Ty Felton's a good speed option for them. They've did what needs to on offense. It's just, can they keep that defense going? Obviously, bringing in 2 defensive tackles to try and show up against the run, but neither of them are good against the run. Bit concerning. Kobe King will be a good sort of rotational linebacker for them to maybe ease in, because I know as much as I'd bet Cashman, this is probably his last big deal, so need some backup there. I know obviously they've got Brian Asamoah, as you said, the 3rd round pick from a couple of years ago that they kind of overdrafted, but that was their big weakness. So getting him in's good. Getting that into edge room's still pretty damn good. Grenard's good. Gavin Van Ginkel, we know how much I love him. They've still got last year's 1st round pick in rotation, Dallas Turner. Obviously, in UDFA, they sign a certain BYU edge rusher that Ant loves, so that's going to break his heart if he gets like a sack fumble on Goff when we play him. Touch wood, that doesn't happen. But yeah, the big weakness was that secondary, and the only big addition they've added to it is Isaiah Rogers, who isn't that good. That was their big weakness last year. I know they re-signed Byron Murphy in the nickel, and I know he will flex outside when Metellus goes into the slot, depending on the formations and that, but their secondary is still an issue, and their run defense will still be an issue. So while, yeah, they can rush the passer and have all these interesting blitz looks, There's a reason we do so well against it is because we know if we can stop that blitz for half a second, you can pick them apart. You can use that blitz against them in the run defense. So while yeah, it's for the most part they've stayed the course. They haven't really upgraded too much anywhere except for the interior offensive line, as I said. That yeah, it does come down to can JJ McCarthy hit the ground running, because if he does, they could have a season like last year. Maybe they'll lose a couple more games because rookie mistakes, but they can contend. But at the same time, that defense isn't exactly that. It will get picked apart, as we've seen when we've played them, when the Rams played them. So be interested to see actually how it comes to it when we start playing them, as you said, of our bye week.
Yeah, I think this is an offense which is built to win. I really like what they've done. The offensive line is top three for me, maybe third though, but I think it's up there with one of my favourite lines. I was wrong about Christian Darrisaw in the draft, and I can freely admit that. But what they've done is made it so powerful and potentially dominant. So that's going to give McCarthy an easy ride, and the rest of the weapons, I think they've done so well there. So the offense has got it, but defense, like you say, you can run on them, and potentially you can pick them apart in the pass too. So this is what I would say. Because of the scheme, the defense is built to absolutely beat up on bad teams. And this defense is not built to win in January. We all want to win in January. Like, as much as it was bad being in the dark times, well, we not ever got into January. Okay, this team will make it to the playoffs. I'm pretty certain of that, even with McCarthy being mediocre at best. But I don't know how many playoff games they're going to win. When they come up against a good team that can pick that defense apart, you're now going to have the offense outscore whatever that defense can lay an egg against. Like, it's going to be hard to outscore teams, especially when you only do that badly against really good teams. And of course, the North is going to be really good to see how good this team actually is, because a lot of these teams are built to beat this sort of team. So can the offense outscore what offenses can do to its defense? That's the big question for the Vikings. In terms of what they've done, they didn't address enough of their needs. I like what they did, but there's other things I would have done too, which I think might have been more impactful. So overall, I think it's a miss for me. I don't like the overall vision, even if I like the individual players they've got at pretty much every pick, every free agency acquisition. I like them all individually, but overall as a plan, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, 100%. Cool.
Let's move on to the next one, which is yours, and it is November 9, and it is at the Washington Commanders, a repeat of the divisional round.
So revenge is on our mind here, obviously going up against, it's the Battle of the Dans with Campbell coming up against Dan Quinn. Their GM is Adam Peters. Last year, as we all know, they went 12-5, shocking the world after picking number 2 overall. Their odds for their division for next year is plus 225 per bet MGM. Pretty good odds. I know obviously they're coming against the Philadelphia Eagles for that. Don't want to say the other two because they're probably not going to be in that race probably. But that's some pretty good odds. Might consider it if I ever get into betting again. Their ins this offseason obviously splashed the cash on former first-round pick Javon Kinlaw from obviously picks by the San Francisco 49ers, went to the Jets with Salah, but now he's in Washington on a 3-year, $45 million deal. They sign, prepare yourselves for the shiver. They signed Will Harris to a 2-year, $6 million deal from the New Orleans Saints. They signed the flexible cornerback Jonathan Jones on a 1-year, $5.5 million deal from the New England Patriots, as well as a 1-year, $3.25 million deal for defensive lineman Dietrich Wise, as well as bringing in Jake Martin, the linebacker, on a 1-year, $2.85 million deal from the Chicago Bears. They also re-signed backup quarterback Marcus Mariota to 1-year, $8 million deal. The fullback and linebacker Nick Ballore, who obviously used to play for us back in the day, 2-year, $4.2 million deal. Noah Brown, the wide receiver, on a 1-year, $3.25 million deal, and then re-signed former first-round pick Clennon Farrell, the edge rusher, for a 1-year, $2 million deal. But obviously, they had outs. as we just heard a couple of minutes ago, they lost Jonathan Allen to the Vikings on a 3-year, $51 million deal. They lost safety Jeremy Chin on a 2-year, 16 and a quarter, roughly $1 million deal to the Las Vegas Raiders. Diami Brown went to the Jacksonville Jaguars on a 1-year, $10 million deal. Former Lions offensive tackle Cornelius Lucas went to the Cleveland Browns on a 2-year, $6.5 million deal. Edge rusher Dante Fowler Jr. went back to Dallas on a 1-year, $6 million deal. And then the cornerback Benjamin St-Juste went to the Chargers on a $2.5 million deal. And as of this point, Jameson Crowder, the wide receiver, former Lions kicker Austin Seibert, and former Lions QB Jeff Driscoll were all unsigned. In the draft, they only had 5 picks. At 29, they stood where they were and took Oregon offensive tackle Josh Conley Jr. At 61, so the bottom of the second, they get arguably one of the steals of the draft with Trey Amos, the Ole Miss corner, who quite a lot of people, myself included, had a first-round grade on. And in the fourth round at pick 128, they take the wide receiver Jalen Lane. At 205, they take the linebacker Kane Medrano. And at 245, they broke Ant's heart and took Arizona running back Ja'Cory Croskett Merritt. According to the PFF, their draft needs were running back. They took Croskett Merritt for that, speedster, offensive guard, because obviously with this injury to Sam Cosmi in the game against us, and then potentially upgrading Nick Allegretti. Didn't really do that, but obviously they did take Josh Conley, so maybe there'll be a bit of movement on the offensive line. Edge didn't really do anything there, and then DB depth at corner was needed, and obviously an upgrade on Will Harris. We all know what's happened there. Well, taking Trey Amos, who should slot in day one at outside corner, definitely upgraded that position for them. So their depth chart, obviously, start at QB is Jalen Daniels, backs up by Marcus Mariota, who re-signed. Journeyman Josh Johnson is QB3, and then former calendar star / college quarterback Sam Hartman is there. QB4 in camp at running back. They've got Brian Robertson Jr., Austin Eckler, Jeremy McNichols, Croskett Merritt, who obviously we mentioned they picked up, but we've also got Chris Rodriguez, the former Kentucky running back, Jimmy Felton they signed in free agency, as well as Michael Wiley. Wide receivers, Terry McLaurin, Scary Terry, great. Noah Brown, Deebo Samuel, who obviously they traded for from the 49ers in a big move this offseason. Backs up by KJ Osborne, Luke McCaffrey, the pick from last year, Jalen Lane, the pick from this year, Michael Gallup, Ja'Cory Brooks. Quite a lot of depth there, to be honest. Offensive line, obviously they traded for Larry Tunsil from the Texans in that big shocking trade that everyone's like, what the hell are they doing? For the Texans, great move for the Commanders here. Left guard, Nick Allegretti. Center, Tyler Beardish. Right guard is probably going to be Andrew Wiley, who they picked up from the Kansas City Chiefs, but obviously usually that would be Sam Cosmi. And then at right tackle, currently they're projected to start Brandon Coleman, but obviously Josh Conley could slot in there. They've got Bobby Hart, Ty Phillips, Michael Dieter, Nate Herbig, Trent Scott. They've got some good depth there as well. And then on defense, obviously they play a sort of base 4-2, where the sort of weak side linebacker can flex between being an outside linebacker and then a traditional off ball. So on the defensive line, they're starting Doran Strong, Deron Payne, Javon Kinlaw, and then Dietrich Wise, backed up by Jacob Martin, Josiah Newton, Eddie Goldman, Clevin Ferrell. At linebacker, the starters are Bobby Wagner at the mic, and then at the wheel, Frankie Louvu, who we all bloody hate because of that illegal hit he laid on Goff that wasn't flagged. Though he also does love to jump off the sides consistently, so balances out. Backed up by Jordan McGee, Nick Ballore, Dominic Hampton, and the draft pick Kane Medrano. At corner, they're starting Mike Sanders still, and Sean Lattimore on the outside, with Jonathan Jones in the slot, backed up by Kevin Seymour, Trey Amos, Noah Igbognogny, and then some UDFAs, including Fentrell Cypress, the former Florida State corner. At safety, they're starting Will Harris and Daquan Martin, backed up by Percy Butler and Jeremy Reeves. Special teams, punter is Tressway, one of the best NFC punters not named Jack Fox. At kicker, they're starting Matt Gay, and then their long snapper is Tyler Ott, the former Baltimore Raven long snapper. So overall, they've actually done pretty well. offensive line was an issue for them. What did they do? Get one of the best left tackles in the league. They needed a receiver to be a wide receiver two opposite Scary Terry and really take some of the heat off him. They trade for Debo Samuel, who's a chess piece on offense. They can put him at running back if they need. They really helped sort of put off Jalen Daniels' potential sophomore slump there. They needed a future starting running back because Robinson and Eckler aren't long term. They go and get one of the best sort of speedy running backs in the draft late on. Defensively, they needed a bit of pass rush. They go and get Dedrick Wise, who's good against the run, good in pass rush. They needed a starter out in the future outside corner. They get Trey Amos, who has said first round grade from most people. They actually had a pretty good offseason, which is scary because obviously the defense was down to basically starting players like me when we played them, but this is a scary team. And obviously I know the team will have revenge on their mind, but the Commanders are the kind of team that can give us issues because they will match us in physicality. And well, they've got a rushing QB who knows who can also pass the ball, which is our kryptonite. So while obviously, hopefully, we'll be a lot healthier coming up into this matchup, they do give me a bit of concern, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the really big question here was what were they going to do on the offensive line, because Jaden Daniels and how good he was rushing the ball and playing kind of quarterback draw and scrambling kind of negated how bad that offensive line was. It was Sam Cosmi and a pile of dust, and the fact that they went in to trade for Laramie Tunsil, I think, is a masterstroke, and drafting Josh Conley. If that works out, and Cosmi comes back healthy, between them, Biadish and Allegretti, it's a fantastic offensive line. Is it a top-tier offensive line? Probably not. It could be ascending. I mean, Tunsil could be on the way down. Biadish probably on the way down, but Connolly on the way up. Herbig, I think, is really good depth too. Wiley, I think, is an interesting pickup as well as a relief guy for Cosmi, and then a rotational piece after that. So they've clearly kind of identified that they don't necessarily want to live the way that they lived last year. And being that Daniels was such an accurate passer, it immediately makes them a pretty scary team, because any upgrade from last year means that Daniels can be that much more effective. I really think that they could have done with an upgrade at running back. I don't think Krosky Merritt is going to be it as a 7th rounder. And with Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler, you have mid. And mid could be fine behind this offensive line, especially with Jaden Daniels being your threat. You know that a kind of rushing quarterback along with a good running back is tough to defend. But, maybe they could have got a better running back to go in there. I don't know. Their weapons, okay, fine. They took Michael Gallup and they brought in Debo Samuel, but I don't think Noah Brown's a 2 particularly. I don't think Luke McCaffrey's a 2. I don't think KJ Osborne's a 2 particularly. Neither, I don't think, will be Jalen Lane. I think that's a weird swing to make here. So they've got a lot of depth at wide receiver without really having too many good players. How good can Debo be is a massive question. Scary Terry's obviously fantastic. Zach Ertz is going to have to catch a lot of balls to make this work, because I do think for as good as Daniels is, the weapons are lacking. Can they scheme up what Debo used to do at San Francisco? Can he be that sort of running back, wide receiver, Swiss Army knife type guy? Because if he can, this could be transformative because it kind of fixes both problems. But we could go back to seeing an off-injured Debo that is kind of a bit off the boil compared to where he was. And then I think they're a bit of nowhere in those weapons, and you're just kind of relying on Daniels to be absolutely magic again. On the defense, they clearly had lots of holes. The fact that they've got Quan Martin and Will Harris as starting safeties is all manners of holy shit. And I really like Quan Martin, but that is one of the weakest safety rooms in the NFL. At corner, I think they probably have it wrong in terms of who's starting and who's not and where. I would be kicking Sam Rastrill into the nickel. That's where he's going very well outside. He's a better nickel to put him there. Jonathan Jones, I don't really want to kick him outside. I'd start Trey Amos and just say, I hope you can do it, mate. I do think Igbenogany had a really good bounce back year from kind of almost being on the scrap heap. So there's enough bodies in that corner room where I think they can make something work. But, how much does Lattimore play? If Lattimore doesn't play, then suddenly you've got a massive hole at starting corner and a bad safety room. So for all you've got that might be good up front and a nice complementary scheme, there's enough weak links in that defense that I think you can pick on it. So I am bullish on this. This is clearly a team, say, compared to the Vikings that we just talked about, with a much better quarterback for right now anyway. But the overall team, I think, is substantially worse than the Vikings. So even though this is at Washington, I'm pretty bullish about this game.
That's fair. Obviously, yeah, I agree with the take on the safety room. Like, Jesus Christ, we've been there with Will Harris. We know what it's like.
Yes, we do. Right, let's move on to the next game, which is the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday Night Football at their place, November 16. And they have had a pretty quiet off-season. Obviously, Nick Sirianni, head coach, Harry Roseman, the GM, they finished 14-3 and won the Super Bowl last year. Their division odds are -175, highlighting just how much of a favourite they are. Of course, no team in this division has repeated in the last 20 years. So we'll see whether the Eagles can be one of the first to do it. In terms of in free agency, they only had Azeez Ojulari, outside linebacker, 1 year, $3 million. In terms of out, well, we've just heard that Bryce Huff is on his way in a trade today. And then otherwise, they lost Milton Williams at DT, 4 years, 104 to New England. Josh Sweat, 4 years, 76 to Arizona. Mekhi Becton, 2 years, 20 to LA Chargers. Isaiah Rodgers, that we talked about just a moment ago, to the Vikings, 2 years, 11. Darius Slay, 1 year, 10 to Pittsburgh. Oren Burks, inside linebacker, 2 years, 5 to Cincinnati. You already put in Bryce Huff, thank you. And then James Bradbury, corner, unsigned still, as is Brandon Graham, who's retired. CJ Uzoma, the tight end, and Rick Lovato, the long snapper. In terms of picks, this is the reason why they can afford to let a lot of people go and not sign that many people, because they picked 4 times in the 6th round, 2 times in the 5th round, and once in the 4th round, as well as their 1, 2, and 3. So they had a lot of picks. First of all, at 31, they traded up 1 spot to go and get Jihad Campbell, the linebacker who Ash really wanted. The safety, Andrew Makuba, came at number 64 in the 2nd round. At 111 in the 3rd, they had defensive tackle Ty Robinson, who I know a lot of Lions fans liked, from Nebraska. And then the day 3 picks. At 145, cornerback Mac McWilliams. At 161, linebacker Smail Mondon Jr. from Georgia. At 168, the corner Drew Kendall. 181, the quarterback Kyle McCord. At 191, the offensive tackle Miles Hinton. At 207, another offensive tackle in Cameron Williams. And then finally at 209 in the 6th round, the outside linebacker Antoine Powell Ryland, which still is the poshest name in the draft. Looking at their overall team then, Hurts is the starter, backed up by McKee and Kyle McCord. They've also got Dorian Thompson-Robinson in there, although given how they've done things, it doesn't seem like he's long for this roster. Running back, Saquon Barkley obviously got a massive deal, 2 years, $40 million in the offseason. He's backed up by A.J. Dillon. In terms of the offensive, wide receivers, A.J. Brown, Jahan Dotson, and Devonta Smith, backed up by Johnny Wilson, Terrence Marshall, and Ananias Smith. Tight ends, Dallas Goedert. He did stay in the end after redoing his deal, and Grant Calcaterra. Offensive linemen of Joy Marlata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Tyler Steen, and Lane Johnson. They're backed up by Miles Hinton, Kenyon Green, who they traded for with Houston in return for CJ Gardner-Johnson. Drew Kendall at centre, backup. Trevor Keegan at right guard, and Kendall Lamb at right tackle. And of course, they've got some draft picks there too. For the defense, they pay a base 3-4, down linemen Morrow Ajomo, Jordan Davis, and Jalen Carter, backed up by Ty Robinson, Thomas Booker, and Byron Young. Outside linebackers of Nolan Smith and Janix Hunt, backed up by Josh Uche, Azeez Ojulari. Inside linebackers of Zach Bourne, Nakobe Dean, Jihad Campbell, Jeremiah Trotter, Smail Mondon. Then the back 5, the nickel is Cooper DeJean, backed up by Mac McWilliams. Outside corners of Keely Ringo and Quinyon Mitchell, backed up by Adoree Jackson and Eli Ricks. And then safety Sidney Brown and Reed Blankenship, backed up by Andrew Makuba and Lewis Seen, if he makes the roster. They also signed one of my favourite players in the draft as a UDFA, Maxon Hook. Special teams, punter Braden Mann, kicker Jake Elliott, long snapper Charlie Hewlett. So, How have they done overall? Well, their needs, per PFF, said they needed in the draft a wide receiver, a guard, an outside linebacker, a corner, and a defensive tackle. Going in reverse then, defensive tackle, they addressed by getting Ty Robinson, cornerback by Mac McWilliams, outside linebacker, only Antoine Powell Rylands, because I think Smelmonder's more of an off-ball.
He can flex, yeah.
At guard, they did not address that, although maybe they can kick someone inside. And then wide receiver, that was also not addressed. So they really did kind of focus in on best player available. But looking overall at that offense, it's a bit of a beast, as it always is. That offensive line is going to be really strong. They've got weapons. You see what Saquon did last year. There's no reason to think that won't happen again. They've got a little bit more depth that they've built. So Jahan Dotson obviously is wide receiver 3, but you saw a bit more out of him last year than you ever have in his career, and maybe that can just continue. And then they're on the Terrace Marshall Reclamation Project train. They've got Johnny Wilson there, who did a little bit. And then, Goddard's going to be great. So they didn't need to do much. Maybe they needed a starter at right guard. Maybe Kenyon Green can be that. Don't know. And then on defense, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Zach Bourne was getting paid $1.5 million this time last year. Now he's getting paid 17. The 3-down lineman, Moro Ojomo was a great rotational player. Now he comes into potentially a starting spot. He was very good last season, but can he be that taking more reps? Can Jordan Davis continue to improve? He was poor for the majority of his career so far, got better last season. And that's really what happened to a lot of this team last year, is they all just got kind of incrementally better, which was really impressive. There's clearly a weakness in their DB room with Keely Ringo being a starter. I wouldn't be surprised to see Adoree Jackson take that spot, to be honest. I'm not a massive Jackson fan, but he's a fairly high floor player who has some flashes. Overall, can't hate what they did, took good players. Their depth is now exceptionally good, basically, across the board. Would I have taken different players? Probably, but I can't hate anything they've done. So, love their off-season. Low-key, wouldn't be surprised to see Kyle McCord start at some point in his rookie contract. I'm going to throw that in there at some point in the end as well, because I think at some point this team is going to fall out of love with Jalen Hurts. No, he had a really good year last year, but we'll see. We shall see. Anyway, Ash, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. So I'm actually going to go to the DB thing first, because I do follow a couple of Philly fans, and good news in terms of the DB room for them is supposedly, take it with a grain of salt, neither Ringo or Dory Jackson will be starting on the outside. Supposedly our lads has got it wrong. I know obviously we've linked it, but supposedly it's DeJean on the outside with Makuba in the slot.
I don't like it. And I was a massive Cooper DeJean fan. And he can definitely hang on the outside. He's a much better nickel.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. I was just throwing that in there. Okay. I do agree. I love Cooper DeJean in the nickel. Like, as much as I love Brian Branch, Cooper DeJean really pushes him for that spot, doesn't he, in terms of the best nickel maybe in NFC. I'm going to focus on the weird positions here. I love what they did with the linebacker room in terms of the draft. Like, they play this weird, like that 3-4 system. It's actually really like Flores' where the inside linebackers can blitz. That's why Zach Bourne obviously got the payday. But getting Jihad Campbell and Smelmonde, 2 inside linebackers with blitzing ability. And then Jeremiah Trotter as one of the backups who's got really, like I've seen him at Clemson, good coverage ability and can blitz. They're going to be able to send all kinds of weird stuff at teams, and it will confuse offensive lines. And that's why they get pressure, because they have took a step back on the defensive line, as we've obviously pointed out, with losing their players they have. Jordan Davis, can he step up? Having that sort of linebacker room now where they can blitz a couple of guys and still trust the people behind them is going to work. Obviously, Jalen Hunt, who we loved last year, can he step up as a starter? I don't know. That's why they've got Azeez Ojulari and Josh Uche. They can rotate in, be good starters, rotational starters. And of course, they've got one of the best defensive minds of the 21st century, in Vic Fangio, leading their scheme. And he's gone away from some of the stuff that got him caught out in the past couple of years. So love their defense. That's always going to be their identity in my heart. And then on offense, they've stayed the course. Yeah, getting Drew Kendall in. There's your backup center. We love, obviously, me and Ant really liked him out of Boston College. Obviously, you saw what happened to our offensive line at the end of last year, where both Jurgens and Dickerson both got hurt. So they were really struggling at centre. So now they're getting a guy who, can sit there, develop, and then, if they need to plug him in, he can do that. Kenyon Green, as much as he's got maligned what happened with him in Houston, obviously the Eagles have got one of the best offensive line coaches ever in Jeff Stoutland. So if anyone's going to turn him into reclamation projects and get something out of him, it's going to be him. I agree that I could see him being started at right guard by the end of the season because Steen is that weak link on that offensive line. So it's good that they've kind of got a potential upgrade there in waiting, kind of like what we've done with our guard room in the draft. And then, they could have used another receiver just to push Dotson down the depth chart a bit, but Terrence Marshall, we'll saw what he did at LSU, where he wasn't the main guy. There wasn't the pressure on him. He was good at LSU, just hasn't happened in the NFL so far. Johnny Wilson, well, I know all about him. Obviously, massive outside receiver, can run block, just needs to work on the concentration drops. If he hits, suddenly there's a high upside guy for them. They've got Danny Gray, who's a speedster, will probably take over the punt return role from Cooper DeJean, because why the hell are you risking one of your best players doing that, Eagles? Come on. But it does, for the offense comes down to, can Saquon repeat last year, which I think he can? Can Jalen Hurts continue to be good enough to pass when they need to? That's the bit I'm still hung up on. That's still the weak link, just like we discussed with the Vikings. It honestly does come down to, can Hurts stay the ship and be good enough to lead them to another divisional title and to back where they were? I still don't trust that like you don't. So I love the McCall pick for them because he's good enough. He's good enough to be a starter in terms of talent. It's just, can he show what he did at Syracuse? Can he continue that in the NFL and maybe wow a team? He could be next year. What's the name of the former Tennessee QB who the Dallas Cowboys traded for from the Patriots? He could be that next year, where you see enough of him in a late season. He comes in relief because Hurts got injured, and so the team be like, we can bet on that.
Joe Milton, by the way.
Joe Milton, yeah, Joe Milton. I could see McCall doing that. Oh yeah, if the team doesn't like Hurts, I know they're signed to a massive contract, groom McCord, and then when Hurts' contract ends, you've got a guy who's got all the prestige behind him, former 5-star recruit for Ohio State, obviously just moved because of some stuff and absolutely showed out Syracuse. McCord could really hit for them, which would be scary because then suddenly, this offense becomes a whole lot better.
Yeah, I think he just fits what they do too. Yeah. Going to be interesting to see what happens with this team, but clearly one of the best in the NFL once again. Let's move on to our next team. Ash, it's yours. November 23 versus the New York Giants.
Yeah, we finally close out this little stretch of NFC East teams. I love how our schedule works. We get all these little runs of divisions. Obviously, the New York Giants are led by Brian Dable, former coach of the year a couple of years ago. How that's turned out, kind of like Kevin Stefanski for the Cleveland Browns. He shouldn't have won it, but you know what? Anyway, GM Joe Schoen, last year they went 3-14. God, imagine what would happen if they never posted that boat pick a couple of years ago. Their divisional odds are plus 3,500 per BetMGM. Sounds about right. They are really in a rebuild, so it could work. If you really want to put like a pound on, just in case, more power to you. Their ins this offseason, obviously the big one, signing Paulson Adebo, the outside corner from New Orleans Saints, on a 3-year, $54 million deal, breaking my heart because he was one of my big free agency targets. They signed the upside of Javon Holland on a 3-year, $45 million deal from the Miami Dolphins. Obviously started his rookie career in Miami really well, kind of fallen off the past couple of years. Can they get something out of him? They signed Chauncey Golston, the defensive end from Dallas, on a 3-year, $80 million deal, bringing James Hudson, the flex offensive lineman from the Browns, on a 2-year, $12 million deal. Russell Wilson, 1-year, $10.5 million from the Steelers, as well as Jameis Winston on a 2-year, $8 million deal from the Browns. Roy Robertson Harris, the flex defensive lineman, 2 years, $9 million from Seattle, and then former Detroit Lion and special team star Chris Board on a 2-year, $5.7 million deal from the Baltimore Ravens. They also re-signed consistent wide receiver 3-4, Darius Slayton on a 3-year, $36 million deal, as well as re-signing Greg Van Roten, the interior offensive lineman, on a 1-year, $3.25 million deal. The outs, backup QB and former Denver Bronco and Seattle Seahawks, Drew Lock, 2 years, $5 million back to the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, sees Joe Jolari to the going cross division to the Eagles on a 1-year, $3 million deal. Safety Jason Pinnock, 1-year, $2.2 million deal to the 49ers. Tim Boyle, QB / clipboard holder, 1-year, $1.255 million deal to the Tennessee Titans. And then Isaiah Simmons has obviously gone to the Green Bay Packers, so I haven't updated that because I'm an idiot. In the draft, they had 2 first-round picks, obviously trading back up at the end. So at 3 overall, they probably sit there laughing as arguably the best player in the draft, Abdul Carter, falls them at 3. At 25, obviously, to trade back up into the first to take their picks of the QBs with Jackson Dart, the Ole Miss QB. At 65, they take interior defensive lineman Darius Alexander from Toledo. At 105, they take Mr. Late himself. If you've watched the latest episode of the St. Brown podcast, you get that. ASU running back and arguably Heisman snub Cam Scatterbo. At 154, Marcus Mbao, the flex offensive lineman from Purdue. At 119, Nebraska tight end Thomas Fedoni II, continuing their little run of like the vague Italian people. And then at 146, Corey Black, the corner, I think he's from Central Michigan. Obviously, there needs to go into PFF in that draft. QB, well, Jackson Dart's that. Offensive tackle, Marcus and Bo's that. He will need a bit of development, but he can come in at right tackle in the future. Interior offensive defensive line, Darius Alexander at the 3rd round does that. And then cornerback, well, Corey Black with their last pick does that as well. Can develop and hopefully start in a couple of years' time. So their offense, obviously headed by the 3-headed monster at QB right now with Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and Jackson Dart, with QB4 being Tommy DeVito, the legend himself. I would not be surprised if there's an over, like the over-under of 2.5 of these QBs starting a game. I'm hitting the over for that. I won't be surprised if each of these QBs starts at least one game for the Giants this season, because that's the kind of team they are right now. They're like up there with the Browns. Obviously, at running back, they've got Tyrone Tracy, the sort of revelation last year out of Purdue, Devin Singletary, Cam Scatterbo, the draft pick from this year, Eric Gray, who's a good sort of backup off running back. Well, some other guys, obviously wide receiver, last year's 1st-round pick, Malik Neighbors, with Darius Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson as the other starters, backed up by Zach Pascal, Jalen Hyatt, Emir Smith-Marset, Bryce Ford-Wheaton, someone I've always loved as a sort of vague backup X receiver, Daquan Felton, Lil John Humphrey. Offensive line of Andrew Thomas, left tackle, left guard, John Runyon, center, John Michael Schmidt Jr., at right guard, Greg Van Roten, and then at right tackle, the British sensation himself, Jermaine Emilio, who signed from the Las Vegas Raiders, backed up by James Hudson, Andrew Stinney, Austin Schlottman, Marcus Mbao, their draft pick from this year, and Stone Forsythe, who they got from Seattle. Tight end room of Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger, Chris Manhertz, Greg Dulcich, pretty good tight end room, if I don't say myself. And then they run a base 3-4 on defense. So they're starting off defensive linemen are Raheem Nunez-Roches, Sexy Dexy himself at nose tackle, and then Roy Robson Harris as the other starter, backed up by former line Jeremiah Ledbetter, DJ Davidson, Darius Alexander, Elijah Chapman, Jordan Riley, former line Corey Durden. At the edge room, they've obviously got their pick from this year, Abdul Carter, with Brian Burns, former 1st-round pick, Kevin Thibodeau, Chauncey Goldston, some other guys. Inside linebackers, Bobby Okereke and Mike McFadden, backed up by Jonathan Johnson, Chris Board, Demetrius Flankenfowles, who ever remembers from last year's most poshest name in the linebacker room. Outside the corners of Paulson Adebo and a former 1st-round pick a couple of years ago, Deontay Banks, backs up by Corey Black, Trey Hawkins, Nick Jones, Art Green. At nickel, they've got Drew Phillips, backs up by Cordell Flott and D. Williams. And at safety, they've got Tyler Nubin, who I loved last year, Javon Holland, backs up by Dane Belton, Anthony Johnson Jr., and Makari Page. Their special teams are Jamie Gillen, the Scottish Hammer himself at punter, At kicker, they've got a battle between Graham Gano and Jude McTominay. And then their long snapper is Casey Courier, who they signed from the Denver Broncos. Again, yet again, it's another team whose offense comes down to the QB because honestly, their game plan week to week depends on who's starting because Wilson does not play like Winston, does not play like Dart. They each have different skill sets. And no, I've seen some clips from their OTA practice that they're getting Jackson Dart running the RPOs, which Wilson can do a bit. Maybe Winston can do every once in a while, but their game plan offensively week to week will depend on who's under center for them because, as I said, you can't ask them to do the same things. So was a bit of confusing move what they've done with their QB room. I do like taking Dart, sitting him maybe for a year and then letting develop because the Ole Miss system is very weird, as we've described in our breakdown of him and then my breakdown of Trey Harris, the wide receiver from Ole Miss in this past offseason. Getting Wilson in a 1 year contract, Winston's 2. Winston's probably going to be your long term vet backup. Wilson's probably there just to fill the gap until you're ready to start Dart, which is fair enough. Offensive line, have they really done much to upgrade it? I don't know. So whoever's under center is not going to have much protection. Whoever's starting running backs are probably Tyron Tracy and Scatterboo. They're not going to have many holes to run through. As much as I like Andrew Thomas, the rest of the line is mid at best compared to worse for some of the other positions. Looking at that right hand side of the line, especially, obviously Malik Nabers is a great receiver, but they don't have much behind him. Like everyone else should be at least one step down from where they are. They should have took someone else there. And defensively, yeah, they've got a really good 1-2-3 punch at edge, and they've got Sexy Dexy, but not much else in terms of the defensive line. The linebacker room is one of the weakest in the NFL. And then corner room, yeah, K. Paulson Deba's a good outside of corner, and Holland guys have good upside, but not as much as I love Newbin. Dante Bax hasn't really worked out as a first round pick. Drew Phillips is okay at the slot, but you could have upgraded there. And they don't have much depth behind them. So if they have a couple of injuries by now, that secondary could be preyed upon if we've got the guys there, especially if our offensive line can hold up against Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and Kayvon Thibodeau, who by this point they probably would have traded, let's be honest. So defensively, you hold back Lawrence, you hold back Burns and Carter, and you pick apart that secondary and run on them. They're done for because I don't think the offense can keep up with us if we're on our day. So as much as I don't want to say it's any given Sunday in the NFL, this is a nice warm-up game ready for Thanksgiving, in my opinion.
I think this is one of the most improved teams from the end of last year to the start of this. I like the moves they've made. I like taking a swing at Javon Holland. I mean, defense is one of those things where it kind of comes and goes, but if you've shown it once, I kind of believe that you can show it again. So I believe in him, and Paulson Adebo I really like too. The quarterback decisions is totally baffling, as you've said. But otherwise, I love their draft. I pretty much love every pick of it. I mean, Jackson Dart, let's see what happens. But otherwise, chef's kiss, fantastic. Really does what it needs to do. This was a bad team last year. It had a good defense, but it was a bad team overall. The offensive line is absolutely key because if it can play slightly better, and I still believe in John Michael Schmidt at centre, if he can hold it together, along with either Illuminor or Stone Forsyth at right tackle and Andrew Thomas at left, you've got 3 guys who can do something. So it's a big if. If you can do that, Wilson's the sort of vet who can hold this all together. You know, he doesn't throw many picks. Low-key actually had a reasonable kind of last couple of years. He looked like he was kind of really treading water badly, but towards the end of the season, he did a bit more good stuff. So I think there's reason to be optimistic with what they have. On defense, they were already good, I think. It's just that the offense was really holding them back. But by now being 3 deep at edge with Dexy, I don't think... How can we say, just hold them 3 back and you can pick them apart? You can't do that. Like, Abdul Carter, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence. That's going to be tough for anyone. Darius Alexander's going to be great too. And then Tyler Nubin and Javon Holland in the upside at their best. That's one of the better safety rooms in the league. And then Deontay Banks got benched at some point, not last year, but the year before. then came back into the side, and I think he's looked slightly better. So if they can get some passable play from him, I think there's enough here to be competitive. I'd low-key think at plus 3,500, that's one of the better value odds in the league, because you only need to have that hit 10% as much as the Vikings. So when the Vikings hit, you get 10 more chances for the Giants to hit. And yeah, okay, in this division you've got Dallas, who are probably ascending again after being poor last year, and you've got Philly and Washington, so it's an incredibly competitive division. But this defense is built to contend with these guys. It's going to go toe-to-toe with some of these offensive lines that really are stacked. So I believe in this team just a little bit. If they can get something from Russell, I quite like it. Loki quite like it. After 3 wins last year, I think this team is creeping back towards 500. If they won 7 or 8 games, I wouldn't be surprised. Is that enough for Daboll to keep his job? Probably not. But, there we go. All right, let's move it on, shall we? But before we do, many thanks to MileMarker301 for the $10 super chat. Says, looking forward to the Philly game. Yeah, it's going to be an absolutely barnstormer game, that. But thank you, MileMarker, much appreciated. Let's go on to then, we're in the second half of this now, the Cincinnati Bengals at game number 5. It's at the Bengals on October the 5th. And why do I not have that up?
Are you looking at the Bengals?
Not the Bengals. It's because I've deleted. Sorry. It's because I deleted the wrong schedule. I have both up. I'm an idiot. Sorry. The Dallas Cowboys. There we go. Sorry. Apologies. Thursday night football, December the 5th. We're skipping over the Green Bay Thanksgiving game. We've talked about Green Bay in the previous episode. Thank you for redirecting me. So, Dallas. We got to the right place eventually. Brian Schottenheimer, the head coach, coming in for his first season. GM is Jerry Jones, of course. It is Jerry's world, after all. 7-10 last year, after having Dak go down with his injury. Plus 650 by ESPN for their odds for the division. I think that's undervalued. This team has shown in 3 out of the last 4 years they can win double-digit games. So why fade them now after one bad year when the quarterback gets injured? I think this team is still going to be a bit of a regular season beast, but we shall see. Bit of overhaul in this off-season after some players came due for their re-upping and their payments. But they did bring in Solomon Thomas and Dante Fowler at edge, as well as Peyton Turner, all basically either vet depth or reclamation projects at this point. They were all under $7 million per. Guard Robert Jones in at just under $4 million per from Miami. Javonte Williams, a running back from Denver, 1 year, 3. Jack Zamborn from Chicago, that's a loss for them, 1 year, 1.5. And then Miles Sanders comes in from Carolina, 1 year, 1 1/3. They also signed the punter Brian Anger, 2 years, 6.4, 3.2 per. But they did lose several high-paid players, including DeMarcus Lawrence to Seattle for $11 million per. Jordan Lewis, a corner, for $10 million per to Jacksonville. Brandon Cooks, the Saints, for $6.5 per. Chauncey Golston, the edge, to the Giants for $6 per. Chuma Adoga for $3.5 per to Jacksonville. Cooper Rush, who obviously did fantastically well in the absence of Dak, to the Baltimore Ravens to be the backup there. Rico Dowdle, Trey Lance, Eric Kendricks, Linval Joseph, and Nick Vigil are the other players they lost. They had plenty of draft picks to go for. They had 9. With the guard Tyler Booker in the first, edge Donovan Ezeraku in the second at 44. In the third, Shavon Ravel, the corner. In the fifth, 2 picks, running back Jaden Blue and linebacker Shamar James. In the sixth, the tackle Ajani Cornelius from Oregon. And then in the seventh, defensive tackle Jay Toyer, running back Phil Maffa, and defensive tackle Tommy Akingbasote. I'm going to say DeSote, probably. Their needs, per The Athletic, were defensive tackle, corner, running back, and wide receiver. Defensive tackle, they didn't hit until late with 2 7th-rounders. Corner with Shavon Ravel. He was going to be like a top half of the first-round player before his injuries, so getting him at 76 is terrific value, but is he over his injury problems? Running back, they took Jaden Blue and Phil Maffa, 2 running backs I really like. Jaden Blue will be a home run hit if he can hang on to the bloody ball. because fumbling is a very, very big issue for him. And then the wide receiver, they did not address. So looking at their overall team, they did, of course, trade for George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's meant to be what does it for them there. Dak Prescott comes back in, and as we mentioned before, they traded for Joe Milton to be the backup. Running backs, Javonte Williams, Jaden Blue, Miles Sanders, Phil Mathis, and Deuce Vaughn as well, who, is still there in his third season. Will he be now? I don't know, because he might be quite a way down the depth chart, potentially. The wide receivers then, George Pickens, as I aforementioned, Jalen Tolbert, who has done little to nothing, and CeeDee Lamb. Their favourite player in the draft from a couple of years ago, Jonathan Mingo, is a backup there, as well as Kevontae Turpin, who quietly did very, very well. Paris Campbell's there as a reclamation project. Ryan Flournoy is still there. Jalen Brooks. Tight ends, they have Jake Ferguson, Luke Schoonmaker, Brevin Spanford. And then the offensive line, Tyler Guyton, Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe, Tyler Booker, and Terrence Steele, backed up by Azim Richards, Rob Jones, Brock Hoffman, TJ Bass, and Ajani Cornelius. On the defense, they play a 4-3 with a 4-down lineman, Donde Fowler, Mazzie Smith, Osa Odigizua, and Micah Parsons, backed up by Ezaraku, Jay Toyer, Solomon Thomas, and Marshall Nealand, who a lot of people still really believe in. The two linebackers, even though it says 4-3, it only lists 2 linebackers, that's fun. DeMarvion Overshone, is he going to play this year? I'm not even sure if he does. I think he might be out for it. Kenneth Murray, Maurice Louis-Fowl, Jack Sanborn, Shamar James, Damone Clark. So pretty deep at linebacker. And then the back 5 starting at the nickel with Israel Mukwambu. I can't say the bloody names of these players. Backed up by Keemon Hall. Corners, Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland, backed up by Shavon Ravel and Kalen Carson, who a lot of us liked in the draft in 2024. And then the safeties, Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson, backed up by Marquise Bell. And Wanye Thomas, I will say. Mm-hmm. Good, thank you. Punter, Brian Anger, kicker, Brandon Aubrey. Fantastic kicker, of course. And Trent Sieg at long snapper. So overall, how does this team look now? Well, I don't think they can be as bad as last year. I just think they do regress upwards because of Dak coming back. Running back seems to still be an issue. Do you believe in Javonte Williams anymore to do it? If not, is Miles Sanders going to be that guy as the veteran backup? Otherwise, they're looking at Jaden Blue or Phil Mafford carrying the load for them, and I think that's not a great start. But offensive line has got some... There's so much here that could go either way. Tyler Guyton, don't know. Cooper Beebe is obviously great. Tyler Booker is a first-round pick this year. Quite high. A lot of people love him. Terrence Steele, I'm not sure. Tyler Smith is obviously good, but I wouldn't say a world beater. And then at wide receiver, Pickens was traded away for a reason. Jalen Tolbert is not good. So CeeDee Lamb is still their only player on that side of the ball. And Jake Ferguson is good, has had a couple of injuries. They lack weapons massively. They don't have a lot of running back. They don't have a lot of wide receiver. And the offensive line is mediocre at best. So it's going to be carried by Dak. He's still a very good quarterback. For all the shit that people want to throw at him, he's a bit of a crybaby. He's still probably a top 16 quarterback. And he does carry that team. He puts it on his shoulders and he does carry them. And people should not overlook that when they look at the overall of this team, because he will put it together. So let's see. I mean, CeeDee Lamb obviously is one of the best, and you can just feed him targets, and that will be a functional offense, therefore. On the defensive side of the ball, Micah Parsons obviously kind of takes over. A lot of this is boom or bust. Trayvon Diggs is boom or bust. Deron Bland is boom or bust. Shavon Ravel is boom or bust. So at corner, safety, I'm not a massive fan of Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson. It's a bag of nothing to me. I love what they have at linebacker in terms of Kenneth Murray, Jack Sanborn, Damone Clark, Louis Fowl. DeMarvion Overshan I was huge on in 2023. He obviously has played fantastically, but that injury is really killing him, unfortunately. The 4-down lineman, even though Tank's gone, I low-key like having Dante Fowler and Donovan Izaraku in a rotation. That seems to make sense to me. The big question is, does Mazzy Smith make a step after basically making nothing of his career so far after coming out of Michigan? Because Odigzua is going to hold stuff down, but you can run on this team, you can pass on this team. They might get a pick or two along the way, but who cares? And then the offense is mediocre at best. They got great odds for a reason. I thought they were better than this, actually, so I've kind of changed my mind going through it. This is not... It's not a fantastic roster led by a good quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. So, like, not to beat the dead horse over and over, but look at the history of receivers that Pittsburgh have let go and come back to me if you think that Pickens is going to work out here, because history would say no. I would like to again shoot my trumpet that, I told you so, Dallas Cowboy fans. I told you to take Tyler Bucker in the first, you idiots. Look at you now. It's a good pick for them, though. He's just slots in that right guard spot, and they do not miss a beat, because it's not the offensive line they had 5-10 years ago, which was the strength of this team. But that interior of, I know, probably I'm a bit higher in Tyler Smith at left guard than you are, but that interior of Tyler Smith, Cooper Beebe, and Tyler Bucker, I actually really like. Terrence Steele is crap at right tackle. And unfortunately for them, as you know very well, Matt, because you profiled him for us, Johnny Cornelius is not going to be much of an upgrade there.
He's
and then Tyler Guyton.
Sorry, he's absolute shit.
He's absolute shit, exactly. And then Tyler Guyton, maybe he can make a jump in year 2, but I did not like him last year. Very famously, I think, especially you heard it when the Texans took him. I loved the Notre Dame tackle Blake Fisher a lot more than like Tyler Guyton. Guyton went at the end of the first. Blake Fisher went in the third. He says a lot. Agree with your overall wide receiver take, though. CeeDee Lamb can carry this offense, but it is very much reeking of first-year Dan Campbell wide receiver room, where Amon-Ra took off in the second half of the season, but for the most part, for most of that season, your only good receiver was Khalif Raymond, who is good, but can he do it by himself? Lamb can, but you have shown that teams can focus in on him, and suddenly your passing offense goes nowhere. They've perhaps got better upside now at running back in terms of Javonte Williams, or we all saw what he did in his rookie season, what he did at UNC. Can he get back to his form? Don't know. But then Jaden Blue and Phil Maffer, well, they're good running backs. Miles Sanders is league average, but maybe that's what they need, just a solid floor. And then Deuce Vaughn, yeah, poor guy. Very good draft story, obviously, having his dad call him because he's the head of college scouting. That's all it's going to really be. Like, this is a guy who's my size, quite literally, at running back. Surprised he hasn't retired by now medically, because he's going to get beat up to shit. Obviously, I love their tight end room because the Dallas Cowboys love taking tight ends. I love Jake Ferguson in the 2022 draft class. They take him. I like Luke Scalemaker the year later. They take him. Fuck you, Dallas. And I loved Hunter Lupke as well from North Dakota State as their fullback. But they haven't really, as I say, it's stayed the same. They are relying on Dak here. Can he come back from his injury properly? If not, well, Joe Milton's the ultimate wild card. He's got the cannon. Can he actually function as an NFL QB if he needs to start properly? I know obviously he has played a couple snaps for New England, but can he start as a functional starter? We might have to wait and see. And yeah, on defense, it's good enough. Obviously, Dante Fowler's good. I probably would expect Donovan Exaraku to be starting by now, though, because I did love him in the draft, as we all know. Nealand I did like as well. But yeah, as much as they've got depth at linebacker's one of the least valuable positions, and I know they play a 4-3 over, so they will rotate those guys. So Sanborn will probably start in that sort of Derek Barnes role, to put it bluntly, which he'll be good at. I love Damone Clark, but obviously with his spinal fusion surgery, he hasn't really lived up to his billing for me. And yeah, that secondary is just, it's high upside, but it's highly volatile. Trayvon Diggs, led the league a couple of years ago in interceptions. He also led the league in yards given up. And oh, wait, the next year, Devon Bland does that. Then when your most stable corner is Kalen Carson, who, I loved from Wake Forest last year, but he's a 5th-round pick from last year, you're kind of in the shit a bit. And as much as Ron Revel, if he didn't have his ACL injury, he probably would have gone high in the draft. We are talking about a guy who played at community college, JUCO, then went to East Carolina and showed out in a couple of good games, but you just did not play any of the big teams last year. So it is betting on the athletic upside. And then it's the same with Courier, who they traded for from Buffalo. They've got a lot of high ceiling, low floor corners. And again, that's something we can pick on. I know obviously last year we were very much raged up by the let's empty the bag trick plays against them because of what happened the year before, but we don't probably need to do that this year. We just need to play good, solid offense and, play consistent defense, and we should be good in this game. We don't need a breakout Hutch game, and I excuse the slight pun there.
All right, let's move it on to the next game, which is December 14 at the LA Rams. Ash, our penultimate one.
Yeah, I'm sincerely hoping this game is not flexed because I don't want what happened last year to happen again. So obviously LA Rams led by Sean McVay and Les Snead, who we've heard a lot about. Obviously last season went 10-7 and thankfully beat the Minnesota Vikings in the playoffs. Their divisional odds are plus 160 according to ESPN, which is pretty good. That's decent in my opinion. Don't know too much betting, but I'd personally bet that. Obviously, their big in this offseason is Devontae Adams in from the New York Jets on a 2-year, $44 million deal to replace their big out, Cooper Kupp, 3-year, $45 million deal to the Seattle Seahawks, basically trading one of the best slot receivers in the league for one of the best slot receivers in the league. So fair play to them. Obviously, brought in Poona Ford, the interior defensive lineman from the Chargers, on a 3-year, $27.6 million deal. And then Colton Shelton, they've brought back from Chicago on a 2-year, $12 million deal to slot back in at center. They resigned the corner Killer Witherspoon to a 1-year, $1.25 million deal, as well as the linebacker Troy Reader on a $1.17 million deal. Out obviously Cooper Kupp, but also Bobby Brown, the defensive tackle, 3 years, $21 million to the Panthers. Michael Hoyt, the flex defensive piece, 3 years, $21 million to the Buffalo Bills. DeMarcus Robinson, the receiver, 2 years, $8 million to the 49ers. Christian Roseboom, the linebacker, 1 year, 1 year, $2.5 million deal to the Panthers. And then Hunter Long, the tight end, 2 years, $5 million to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then in the draft, obviously they traded out of the first with the Atlanta Falcons. So the Falcons could blow their load and come up for James Pierce Jr. At 46, they take the Oregon tight end, Terrence Ferguson. At 90, they take Michigan's outside linebacker, Josiah Stewart. At 117, Auburn running back, Jarquez Hunter. 148, they take our first round pick, Tyler Williams, running mate at Ohio State in interior defensive lineman Ty Hamilton. 172, they take the Ole Miss linebacker Chris Poole Jr. And then at 242, they take the receiver out of Pitt, Condata Mumpfield. According to The Athletic, their draft needs a corner. They did not address. Interior linebacker, they did not address. Well, until Blaze on with Chris Poole, who's good. He could definitely slot in and be product linebacker free for them instantly, but not really a starter right now. Right tackle, did not address. Tight end, obviously took that over 46 with Terrence Ferguson, and then wide receiver, they wait until the 7th round to address that, which is a bit of a new for them. So they're starting offense, obviously, under center, number 9 himself, Matt Stafford, backed up by Jimmy G, who at this point, come on, take the hint, just go and be a model somewhere. You're not a good QB anymore. And then Stetson Bennett, who the less said about him, the better, I think. I'm trying to avoid those jokes. Running back, they've got Kyron Williams, really good, backed up by Blake Corum. Obviously, we know a lot about because he played for Michigan. Jarquez Hunter, their pick from this year. Ronnie Rivers, who is a really good, underrated running back. I think Craig Reynolds. Curtis Schrader, who obviously they picked up off waivers from San Francisco last year. Really good running back as well. Sort of second-year player, obviously. Wide receiver, Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell as their starters, backed up by Jordan Whittington, Konata Muntfield, and then Quintus Cephas. There's a big drop-off after those three, arguably, even maybe 2. But I'm not the biggest Tutu Atwell fan, to be honest. I think he's just a speed merchant. It's very undersized, but does well enough in this offense to have a starting role. Tight end, Tyler Higbee, Terrence Ferguson, Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen, who I loved in a couple of years ago at the draft, backed up by Anthony Torres, Mark Redburn, UDFAs this year. Offensive line is Lev Jackson at left tackle, Steve Avila at left guard, Colton Shelton, obviously their free agent signing this offseason back from Bears, centre, at right guard, Kevin Dotson, and then Rob Havenstein as their right tackle, backed up by David Quesenberry, Boo Limmer, Katie Levinson, who took in the 7th last year, Ron McClendon, JJ Courier. That's about it. So they've got a decent starting 5, but the depth behind them when you get down to like Boo Limmer, Katie Levinson, ain't exactly great. And then on defense, obviously the player-based 3-4 system. So the 3 down linemen, Braden Fisk, Kapuna Fawn, Kobe Turner, 2 of my favorite young defensive tackles right there with a really good nose tackle, backed up by Deshaun Johnson, Tyler Davis, Ty Hamilton, the pick from this year, and Jack Heflin. Their edge room is Byron Young and Jared Verse, obviously reigning defensive rookie of the year, backed up by Joshua Stewart and Brendan Jackson, who I loved in the draft last year as a sort of late round pick. Also, Keir Thomas as well, Nick Hampton, who people might remember out App State a couple of years ago in the draft. Inside linebackers of Troy Reader and Omar Spates, backed up by Leighton Nandman, Chris Poole, Elias Neal, Tony Fields, and Sean Dolak, who obviously was the tackle machine from Buffalo in this past draft cycle. They got him as UDFA. I actually expect him to maybe climb the depth chart and be by the back of 4-5 for them and stick on the roster. And then their secondary, Darius Williams and Killer Witherspoon as the outside corners, backed up by Kobe Durant, Darren Kendrick, Cam Lampkin, and Emmanuel Forbes, obviously the former first-round pick for the Commanders. Their nickel is Quentin Lake, backed up by Josh Wallace, Charles Woods, and Sean Jolly. And then at safety, they've got Cam Cole and Cam Kitchens. Good safety room, backed up by Jalen McCullum, Tammy Ingle, and then Nate Fakari. And then their special teams, Ethan Evans as their punter, place kicker Joshua Carty, who obviously got the draft in the 6th round last year, really good. And then their long snapper is Alex Ward. It's a decent starting team, shall we say. They've got a lot of good starters, but then when you get to the depth, it just isn't there right now. Like, they've got some depth at running back, they've got depth at tight end, not much at wide receiver, not much at offensive line, not much really at defensive line. Edge, okay, maybe they do. And then it's in the secondary, they don't. So it's a very much if this team can stay healthy and they don't have sophomore slump from their big picks from last year, they should be pretty damn good in that competitive division. But if there's a couple of injuries, if Verse doesn't live up to last year, if Fisk doesn't, there might be some issues for this Rams team, because obviously San Francisco should be better than they were last year. Seattle, well, hopefully they might be a bit better in year 2 under their new head coach that they got. And for some reason, Arizona are always competitive in their division. So it could, by the time they get to this time of the year, mid-December, I'm turning 27, so give me a nice birthday present, Detroit Lions. If they've got a couple of injuries, this is a beatable team, and it might be the final time that we see Staff. So hopefully it'll be a good game.
It's an interesting team. Obviously, they won the division last year. I like some of what they've done. They seem to have taken good players. That they trade out of the first round, didn't they? So
yeah, Atlanta.
Yeah, so picked up a 1 in the process. So I like the process from the GM. I think that it represents good business. And when you take players like Chris Poole as late as they do, it's hard to dislike it. I'm not a big Josiah Stewart fan. I've said that several times, but he goes in there as depth. I think that's fine. It's not unlike how I feel about the Dallas Cowboys. The quality here is better, but it's still a bit boom or bust. Running backs are obviously going to be really good here, but I'm not a big Rob Haverstein guy. I think Coleman Shelton's an absolute liability. Bo Limmer should start. Alaric Jackson? Okay. So the offensive line is not great. I like Tutu Atwell somewhat. He's made some big catches for them in the last, 18 months or so. So while I don't think someone like that should be able to succeed, he's kind of surprising me. And then obviously Puka and Devontae. I mean, they're both volume receivers, so I wonder how that's actually going to work out. But 2 fantastic receivers. I mean, Cephas being there is a bit of a surprise, eh? But otherwise, so the offense has enough to get by, and obviously Stafford's one of the best. Tight end, I think, is a weak. Higbee, Ferguson, I wasn't big on. Parkinson, it's not for me. So There's enough weaknesses there that I don't think is fantastic, but when, your offense runs through strength, Stafford can get by on that offensive line, and with Adams and Nakua, he's going to get people who can win. So it should be okay. On the defense, if it doesn't win up front, it's not going to win anything. Linebackers are poor overall. Reader, Spates, Landman, and Poole. That ain't scaring anybody. The DBs, while the safety room is fine in Curl and Kinchins, it's not amazing. And then Lake, Akella Witherspoon, and Darius Williams. Like, come on. Akella Witherspoon's shocking. And I love Akella Witherspoon, but he should be like cornerback 4 or 5, ideally. I like him as a vet minimum guy. I think they signed him for vet minimum. How's he projected to start? Like, you should be able to pick on this. So basically, you're relying on Fisk, Turner, Young, Verse really doing the business up front. And it should. That's really scary. And Poona Ford coming in, that changes the dynamic of that team, because now suddenly it's going to be really hard to run on that team. He's one of the best nose tackles in the game. So that front 3 is exceptional when the outside linebackers are really good. You are relying on those 5 to bail out everyone else. That is not built to win in the long term. That's not built to win in January. So it's going to be a team that's hard to beat in a one-on-one game, and they could beat anyone in the league. And they, I think, almost did beat the Eagles in the playoffs, or am I going mad?
Nearly, yeah.
So,
they
could do it, and Stafford could will any team to a win in any game. But in a long-term plan where you've got to reel off consecutive wins against really good teams, this team ain't it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? They've got an extra one next year to go and get a quarterback for when Stafford does retire in, I think, 2 seasons' time, because I don't think he'll leave the money on the table that he's just signed for, personally. But anyway. All right, we are on, I think, to our last team here, which is the Pittsburgh Steelers on December 21st. We're not going to profile again the Vikings because we talked about them earlier on in this episode. And the Chicago Bears, the final game on January the 4th. Don't know exactly when that game is going to be. I mean, we're playing on Christmas, man. Oh my God. I don't know if I'm going to be able to watch that game. Anyway, Pittsburgh Steelers, last unique game, December 21st, at home. The Steelers, Mike Tomlin, head coach. How long does he survive with more than half of the fan base hating him? I don't know. I still think he's one of the best people managers and potentially play callers in the game. I'm not entirely convinced about the skill of choosing your coordinators, and that's quite an important thing. But hey, GM is Omar Khan. They finished 10-7 last year in another winning season. They are plus 600 to win in the division this season. They had a lot out and not a huge amount in. DK Metcalf was obviously the really big trade in from the Seattle Seahawks, and they re-upped him to a really big deal. Otherwise, they brought in Darius Slay from Philadelphia, 1 year 10. Malik Harrison, the inside linebacker from Baltimore, 2 years 10. Mason Rudolph, quarterback, backup, 2 years 7.5. Is he backup? Could start at the moment. Probably not. Brandon Eccles at corner, 2 years 6 from the Jets, and one Thornhill, the safety from Cleveland, 1 year 3. They re-signed Ben Skowronek, wide receiver, 2 years 4.5, and Calvin Anderson, tackle, 2 years 4. Out, they lost a significant amount. Dan Moore, tackle, 4 years 82 mil to Tennessee. Justin Fields, quarterback, 2 years 40 to the Jets. James Daniels, offensive lineman, 3 years 24 to Miami. Dante Jackson, corner, 2 years 13 to the Chargers. And then otherwise, Russell Wilson, Larry Ogunjobi, Najee Harris, Landon Roberts, Mike Williams, Preston Smith, CJ Henderson, DeMonte Casey, and George Pickens in the trade to Dallas. They, of course, have been heavily rumoured to be picking up Aaron Rodgers. Does it happen? Who knows? But Rodgers has himself very much hinted at it. In terms of draft picks, they took from Oregon defensive tackle Derek Harmon in the first round. In the third round, running back Caleb Johnson, who a lot of people thought might sneak into late first or early second round conversation, falls towards the back end of the third. Jack Sawyer from Ohio State in the fourth. In the fifth, Yaya Black. In the sixth, Will Howard, quarterback. And then in the seventh, linebacker Carson Bruner and cornerback Dante Kent. In terms of their needs pre-draft, quarterback was listed. They took Will Howard. I think that's a really good swing, especially in the sixth round, especially when your starter at the moment is Mason Rudolph. Running back, obviously, Najee left. They did take Caleb Johnson. So obviously that's a big swing in the third round for someone who was meant to go a bit higher. Tackle, they did not address offensive tackle in this draft. And then safety, they did not address that either. So having a look at their overall team, obviously the weaknesses at quarterback. Mason Rudolph is a capable backup in this league, but he's no more than that. Will Howard has proven himself to be a capable quarterback in the college ranks, so it's interesting to see what he does there. At running back, Caleb Johnson is probably going to start, but Jalen Warren was fantastic last year, so that's a good two-headed monster. And behind them, they've got Kenneth Gainwell, Trace Sermon, and Evan Hull, as well as Cordarrelle Patterson. So they're not short of big players back there. They also play a lot of fullback. Connor Hayward is going to be that guy. And then wide receivers, DK Metcalf, Robert Woods, and Calvin Austin, with Scotty Miller and Roman Wilson behind them. Let's see what happens with Roman Wilson, third round pick in 2024 out of Michigan. Didn't play a snap last year, I don't think, after getting injured. There's not a lot there otherwise. Robert Woods didn't have a good year at Houston last year and hasn't had a good year for a while. DK Metcalf is obviously fantastic, but otherwise, I mean, Scotty Miller is not good. He's had flashes, but I think he got dumped by Tampa Bay originally because he just couldn't learn a playbook particularly well, and so they couldn't trust him to be out on the field, which is a bit scary. Calvin Austin, loved him in the 2022 draft, and he's had some big plays, but he's not a consistent receiver. None of them, bar Robert Woods, are really a volume guy, and Robert Woods, like I said, hasn't been good for a while. So can Roman Wilson be that guy? Maybe, but you're counting on a lot from him. There's a big missing piece there. Can that be filled by Pat Fryermuth? Maybe. He's still a terrific tight end. Darnell Washington behind him and Donald Parham as well. In terms of offensive line, Broderick Jones, Isaac Somalu, Zach Frazier at centre, Mason McCormick at right guard, and Troy Fountaneau at right tackle, the 2024 first round pick. They're backed up by Dylan Cook, Nick Broker, Spencer Anderson, Max Scarping, and Calvin Anderson. I would suggest it's a boom or bust offensive line. All fairly highly drafted apart from Mason McCormick, who I think did quite well last year. Fountaneau, God knows what you're going to get with him really. But otherwise, Zach Frazier I have a big belief in. Broderick Jones, I don't think he's it. So we'll see, but it's slightly scary, I think, especially on the left-hand side of the line there. I think you can get at that. And I don't think Fryermuth or Darnell Washington's obviously an absolute beast, but he's actually a good receiving threat. Is he a great blocker? He's going to have to be, because Fryermuth is not a fantastic blocker either, and Washington's probably going to be the inline guy there. So it's a bit scary, that offense, in terms of just not having a lot. Outside of quarterback, it lacks. And then on the defense, base 3-4, three down linemen of Derek Harmon, Keanu Benton, and Cameron Hayward, backed up by Daniel Ikwale, Yaya Black, and Isaiah Loudermilk. Outside linebackers TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, backed up by Nick Herbig and Jack Sawyer. Inside linebackers Patrick Green and Peyton Wilson, backed up by Cole Holcomb and Malik Harrison. Nickel is Beanie Bishop Jr. backed up by Brandon Eccles. Outside corners, Darius Slay and Joey Porter Jr. backed up by Corey Trice and James Pierre. And the safeties, Deshaun Elliott and Minka Fitzpatrick, backed up by Miles Killebrew and Juan Thornhill. Also did pick up Sebastian Castro as a UDFA, who seemingly everyone liked and no one drafted. Special teams, Cameron Johnson's the punter, Chris Boswell the kicker, Christian Kuntz the long snapper. I did talk about the offense already. On the defense, love their front seven. It's maybe the strongest front seven in the league for me. Harmon, Benton, Hayward, Watt, Queen, Wilson, Highsmith. That's scary. I mean, Peyton Wilson is a ticking time bomb in terms of when his career ends with what's happened with him at college, but he is an exceptionally high level inside linebacker, even going into year two. Patrick Queen looks fantastic when he's got a reliable linebacker next to him. So that works. And then Highsmith and Watt, two of the best 3-4 outside linebackers in the league. Harmon, let's see what happens with him. But Benton's been fantastic at nose, and Cameron Hayward is Cameron Hayward. So scary. On the back end, Slay's a massive upgrade on what they have. Joey Porter Jr., let's see. But Minka Fitzpatrick's great. Deshaun Elliott, we've seen what we need to see from him. If they can upgrade from him, fantastic. Beanie Bishop at nickel, yeah. So there's a couple of holes there, but overall that defense is scary, and we know it. That's what they're known for. So on offense, it's a bit scary what they lack. They've invested a lot on the offensive line, which could be really good, but not so great. Weapons lacking otherwise, quarterback lacks, but the defense is going to keep them in games. Ash, what do you make of their offseason?
I completely agree with your assessment at the start, though, that it's the coordinators that's the massive issue here. Like, their defensive coordinators, obviously Terrell Austin, who we know a lot about because he used to be our one here member back in the day. The coach who seemingly would always get, oh yeah, he could be a head coach one day, and it never happened for him. And then obviously offensively, it's Arthur Smith, the guy who had Carl Pitts and did not know how to use him. Just had a dysfunctional offense. Argue was carried by Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee. That's how bad of an offense coordinator, head coach and offense coordinator he is. It's also probably why they've got links with John Smith recently, because number one, as you said, they need another weapon there. Number two, John Smith was really good in Tennessee under Arthur Smith. Maybe he just wants someone he can trust to throw to, because, yeah, as much as I love Pat Fryermuth, it hasn't happened for him. Fortunately, he hasn't reached the heights that we thought he would. DK Metcalf is a big physical receiver, except for when you press him. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. The people that saw the thing yesterday came about contested catch rates against press. Robert Woods is now living up to his nickname of Bobby Trees because he moves like a tree. And obviously Calvin Austin, as you said, is a decent-ish slot receiver, but isn't exactly that. So you've got a mid QB with a bad offensive line, as you said, like their center's good, right guard's okay, but everything else is mid to bad. Barely any weapons to throw to, and you're arguably leaning on a rookie running back who is good at what he does, which is a one-cut kind of system, but if you ask anything more of him, he's not going to get much of him. You've got Jalen Warren, who's a good running back too, but then not a lot behind him. Like Kenneth Gainwell, he only seems like he plays well against Dallas Cowboys. Trey Sermon, well, we all saw what happened with him in San Francisco and Indianapolis. Cordell Patterson, but that's just a returner at this point. And then Connor Hayward's a good fullback, but that's about it. So they will have to lean on that defense. As you said, that front seven is really good. Got some depth there. Like, I do like Yaya Black as a backup nose tackle. Cole Holcomb's a good backup linebacker. Obviously, they've got some depth as well in the secondary. Like Corey Trice is okay if you need to lean on him for a game. Obviously, Sebastian Castro, and absolutely loved. If they ever have to play him, they won't miss a beat at strong safety. Dante Kent, he's the fast West Michigan slot corner, so at least they've got someone to match up against some speed vertical options in the slot. But yeah, he is, if that front seven can't get home, this secondary get picked on. Like Darius Slate is a good corner, but fortunately on a downswing of his career, unfortunately. So you might be able to get some joy in him. Joey Porter Jr. we did like, but yeah, that's probably the side you want to avoid. But that safety room isn't exactly great, especially if Aaron does come, because suddenly Deshaun Elliott will be gone because of the comments he made during the offseason. So they'll be back to starting either Juan Thornhill, who flamed out for the Kansas City Chiefs, or Miles Killebrew. What a throwback that is. It is. They rely on that front seven. If that doesn't get home, secondary can be picked on and the offense can't keep up. So long as it's not a repeat of the last time we played them, because I really do not want to see a punter try and kick a game-winning field goal again. I think we should be okay.
All right, some final takeaways from this schedule then. So last week we profiled the first 7 games, which are at Green Bay versus Chicago, at Baltimore versus Cleveland, at Cincinnati, at Kansas City, and versus Tampa Bay before a Week 8 bye. And then we've just profiled versus the Vikings, at the Commanders, at the Eagles, versus the Giants, versus the Packers, versus the Cowboys, at the Rams, versus Pittsburgh, at the Vikings, and finishing off at the Bears. Obviously, we have the full slate of primetime games. We have a Christmas Day game. We already knew we were running the gauntlet when it came to playing the away games. We've obviously got Thanksgiving too. So the Lions are going to be shown a lot on TV. There's not a huge amount of games in a row, away or at home. Finish off with 2 away games. The first one where you have several in a row of something, not including the bye in between stuff, because I think that breaks things up enough, is you've got 2 away games in weeks 10 and 11 at Washington, at Philly, and then you've got 3 home games in a row. Giants, Green Bay, and Dallas before that away stretch to finish. So the first 8 games are all away, home, away, home, away. Oh, sorry, I've missed out 5 and 6. Sorry, Cincinnati and Kansas City. My bad. But it does seem like there's a good amount of there's not stretches in there, generally speaking, so it's hard to kind of get on a run at home or be comfortable being away for a while. Any high-level takeaways from it all, or, do you think this is favourable or unfavourable considering how things could have gone? Because we knew who we were facing anyway.
It's again beating a dead horse here. That sort of stretch before the bye, especially those last 3 games before the bye, are going to be very telling for our season. Obviously, I know we've got to go to Baltimore week 3, Monday Night Football. That's going to be tough. But then you're going up against, so week 5 to 7, you've got at Cincinnati, showing up against their high-powered offense. You're going to Arrowhead against Patrick Mahomes. I know we beat them last time, but we know what they're like. And then Tampa Bay always seem to give us a good game. Those 3 games, I don't want to say could make or break our season, but that could be the microcosm of our season. If we do well there, I've got very good hopes. If we look okay, yeah, I can accept that. But if we look bad in those games, because I could see all 3 of those teams being in the playoffs at the end of the season potentially, that isn't good, because again, we always want the progression, and those are 3 really good teams. So if we don't show up there, you've got a bit of an issue. Luckily, then you've got the bye to rest up. Relatively easy till then, and then you get to the crunch time at the end of the season. I hate that we've got Thanksgiving and Christmas Day. It's bad enough that my family can have to put with me trying to watch Thanksgiving and that, but Christmas Day, I feel bad for the players. I feel bad for reporters. I feel bad for everyone. Who wants that? Even for us, it'd be 9:30 at night for us, so we'd probably finish at 1 o'clock in the morning. That sucks, especially for us English fans, because then we've got that sleep, and then we've got Boxing Day our Boxing Day football. It's horrific. It's too much, but at the same time, it's the NFL. What do we expect? And I've got optimism. We're probably not going to win as many games as last year, because it's pretty much impossible to do what we did last year. But it's not exactly a doom and gloom schedule. There's winnable games, there's losable games. I had trust this team to at least put out a good show. The one fear that I have is that we finally break the streak of not losing 2 games in a row, which we've never done under Dank. Obviously, ever since we started winning, we've never lost that in 2.5 years. That could come to an end here, which scares me, because that's one of my favourite records that we have.
It's going to be interesting to see how we go. I really think a lot hinges on game 1. And I know that's really weird to say, but everyone thinks, from our side, we'll win at Green Bay. And I just don't think it's that simple. I think we're much better than them. At their house, week 1, when, it's the first actual snaps of the season, anything can happen there. If you go in after that 0-1, the rest of the schedule looks really tough. You win that, you start off with a bang, hopefully beat Chicago too. You go into at Baltimore at 2-0. The pressure is suddenly slightly off you. You go in at 1-1. I don't know. Suddenly there are a lot of must-win games in this schedule, and you're looking at down the stretch, being at home for Giants, Green Bay, and Dallas, needing to run the table on that, and you should. But when you need to suddenly start going on a run, that's when the pressure can get to you, and this team needs to kind of give itself a little bit of breathing space. And it just doesn't appear to be a lot of that. We just need to go out there and walk all over these teams. So we, of course, will do a full season prediction much nearer the time. Otherwise, we have got some great content for you coming up. We will be addressing some mailbag questions just after we end the audio pod here, but we're going to sign off on the audio show now. If you want to hear the answers to the questions, then do check out our YouTube and Twitch channels. The main podcast will be back on Monday. I was going to say next week. It's technically next week, I guess, but in a few days' time, recapping week 1 of OTAs. And the college podcast will be back hopefully in a couple of weeks with Ant profiling the conferences for the 2025-26 college football season. Our socials, it's Roar the Lions UK, really, on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. You know where to find us. And the website, roarthelionsuk.com. Please subscribe, rate us 5 stars on your podcast provider. Ash, thank you for doing this with me, man. Guys, on the audio pod, we'll see you in a few days. For now, let's go Lions One Pride.
One Pride.
Recording stopped.
Right. Questions, and I will be brief because we've done this longer than I had intended. Death Fan Man says, reasonably, how poor can our road record be where we still win the division? I'll start by saying I think we need to win 12 to win the division. I don't think 11 will do it. If you need to win 12 and you walk your road schedule, and we have 8 home, 9 away, is it? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 away, 8 home. So if you go 8-0 at home, you need to go 4 and 5 away. There we go. That's your answer. You can go 4 and 5 away and still win the division. But honestly, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. Especially, as I say, with the games we've got away, like excluding our division, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Kansas City, Philadelphia. I might even put Washington on there. Those are all tough games.
Yeah. Anyone away is tough. But like, can you imagine the situation where we need to be winning in at Chicago, in a place where the last 2 seasons they should have beaten us twice, I think, from memory. They can play spoiler to us like we did to the Packers 3 years ago. You know what I mean? So it would be an interesting prospect. I don't think the Lions should be aiming for a division title this year, looking at the schedule and looking at how tight the division is. I think the aim should be at least high wild card and just play for January. I'm not saying take your foot off the gas. Obviously, in order to do that, you've got to be all gas, no brakes. But I think, given what we're seeing here and what we knew was coming, I think we need to not beat ourselves up if it doesn't happen this season in terms of division title, because the goal's Super Bowl. And we can do that from the 5 seed or the 6 seed. No one wants to play us away from home. Frankly, we're better away than we are at home. So,
yeah. I mean, look at last season. All 3 of our games that we lost were at home. Tampa Bay, Buffalo, Washington.
Yeah. All right. 2 more questions from the same person. Thank you to Ross via email. He says, I feel like I'm going a little crazy with how people are talking about the Lions' defense this season. Ever since the playoff loss, there's this huge emphasis on upgrading the defense, especially adding a tier 1 edge rusher. But that defense was actually solid for much of the year last year until injuries piled up. They were pulling guys off the street to fill in at one point. With the additions they've made through the draft and free agency and assuming better health, am I wrong to feel optimistic about this unit, or has the narrative just kind of run away from the context?
No, you're completely right to feel optimistic about it. The only hang-ups I can see is obviously some of the changes that happens. Obviously, we've lost Carlton, we've brought in DJ Reed, which looks an equitable move, but obviously Carlton was here in the system. We knew what we're getting him. DJ Reed, it could just be we've done this before, where big free agent signing looks to fit, just doesn't. And then obviously the change from Aaron Glenn, who, he was a first-time defense coordinator with us. He'd been a DB coach for a long while before that, been there, done that, knew the system. Shep is he's still in his infancy in his coaching career, so there might be a step back there. But yeah, assuming better health and the fact we probably won't be pulling linebackers off the street, as you're saying, like Ezekiel Turner and that, who should not really be starters in this league, it should be still a damn good defense, especially with TA potentially making the jump, Rakestraw making jump, better depth at cornerback room, linebacker room. Well, we've got so many linebackers now that hopefully we never have to pull one off the street because we've got so many signed. And then the defensive line, yeah, that's the make or break. Can Davenport be healthier for more than a couple of games? Can Pascal play well in a contract year? Can Levi live up to what he played last year? Can Aleem come back from his injury? How can Wingo do that? Can Hutch do that? It's unfortunate defensive line, but luckily Casey Rogers is a damn good defensive line coach. So, yeah, it's completely fair to be optimistic about it because the signs are there for it to be damn good. And that's the thing. Everyone looks at our offense. Oh, they've lost Ben Johnson, all that. No one's looking at our defense and thinking, hang on, they've got potential defensive player of the year coming back off an injury here. And they've got a second year, some guys who can make that second year jump. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. To be honest, I think we were in DVOA either second or first through the first half of the season on defense. We were an exceptionally good defense. And I mean, let's assume the opposite. Let's assume we are actually healthy. What happens if Davenport plays like 14 games? No one is literally talking about the upside of what might happen because we're always burnt by the downside. But the upside of what might happen is this is the best defense Detroit has ever seen. I think pretty much ever. Better than 2011. This could be it.
Better 2014.
Yeah, it really could be it. So I choose to believe that we will get our rub of the green at some point in terms of injuries on both sides of the ball. If we do, watch out for the rest of the league. The second question from Ross is, every year after the draft, I find myself frustrated with how we talk about player value, especially the obsession with linear big boards. It seems like the 7th ranked guy is just one unit better than the 8th ranked guy, when in reality talent isn't evenly distributed. We're often discussing differences between elite players playing different positions where there may only be a hair's breadth between them. There are tiers, right? Maybe the top 10 or 12 guys are all about equal, then a drop to the next tier, which might have 40 or 50 players, then another drop. Why do we keep acting like every pick is a direct one-to-one value proposition? Wouldn't it make more sense to talk in terms of tiers and schematic fits rather than some imaginary consensus ranking? So I'll go first for this one. You're absolutely right in terms of there being tiers. However, I think it depends what kind of players that you're talking about, first of all. So if you were ranking the top 100 NFL players, I don't hate going linear, but I do think it makes more sense non-linear in terms of just putting them in buckets, because we've seen so much from the pros. They are easy things to project. There's a lot of tape. It's been analysed to oblivion. When it comes to the draft, it's a crapshoot. No one really knows how good these guys are going to be. And so putting them in buckets, like, okay, fine, but lots of other people are going to disagree with you, and not disagree with you in terms of a little bit. It's not like in the NFL where you say, I think this is the 100th best player, and someone goes, well, I think they're the 80th best player. And it's like, okay, well, we're kind of the same. Whereas in college ball, looking at the draft, it might be, I think this guy's the 20th best player in the draft. And someone might be, I don't think this guy's a day 2 pick. So the variance is so high. And when it is, it's hard to put people into buckets because no one really knows how good these players are going to be. Some are more straightforward and some aren't. But when you're having a look at value in the draft, you are picking players linearly. Therefore, it kind of makes sense to rank them linearly because you're matching how you draft with putting some value on the player. And I think what you do is you have a linear rank with context, but the benefit of having a linear rank as well is that other people also do linear ranks, and you can compare them, you can make consensus boards, you average out some of the problems you have in the scouting process. So it's boiling it down to a mathematical thing, and it's a practical thing rather than anything else. So I agree with you in principle, but I think the practicalities of things dictate that linear boards are always going to kind of win. And also, they're easier to look at when it comes to digesting content.
Yeah. And my take on it is that it also depends on the context. So if you're looking at, okay, ranking players for the Lions, then yeah, 100% tiers and schematic fix works better. But for most draft media, because they have to look at all 32 teams, linear ranking of 1 to 100 to whatever, not only is it the best way, it's actually more accurate. You look back at drafts, and more often than not, the consensus rankings of all, if you put together all the big boards from like Darren Jeremiah, the Athletic and all that, they're actually more accurate than the NFL teams drafting in terms of projecting talent. So while we get 100% discussing player value, especially let's call like the elephant in the room with all these trade ups we've done the past couple of years for Isaac Tesla this year, Manu last year, all this. In terms of looking at this, the wider scheme, yeah, player value in that. Look at the NFL, it's like, yeah, that is a massive reach. Most people had Tesla as the day 3 pick. But then, yeah, you look at the context of, well, the Lions need a long-term X. He's a good schematic fit. The fact he turned up to his bloody his 30 visit with us with a personalised Lions jersey because he's such a scheme fit for us, that does push him up the tiers in terms of need and fit and that he becomes a value for us. But yeah, I think it's hard to sort of differentiate from the team specific context that we can do with our scouting, with Eric, with Pride of Detroit, with Riz and all that, where because they know the team inside out, they're able to do the static fits and the tiers a lot better for the Lions. But then you look at the traditional Lions, wider media, where they're having to look at what the Lions need, but also what the Bears need, but also what the Falcons need, but also what the Browns need. Linear makes a lot more sense because then you aggregate all these schematic things. And the difference between what you value as a person is obviously, for me, when I look at receivers, I'm valuing contested catchability and route running, and that other people might value athleticism, so they rank things differently. As you said, it aggregates it all out and it makes it a lot more accurate ranking for overall talent compared to value for a certain team.
It's a fair point. I think linear boards are the most simplistic way of doing it, where you kind of take context out of it. If you want to add some context to it in terms of buckets, you kind of have to go the whole hog in terms of different buckets, different players, different positions within positions, and all of that, really tough stuff. It basically needs to be a full-time job for you to do that properly. So, impractical, unfortunately, but there we go. Anyway, thank you for your questions. Much appreciated. If anyone else wants to get in any for Monday, please do send them over. Otherwise, Ash, thanks for hanging on for some extra time. Guys in the chat, thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Let's go Lions, One Pride.
One Pride.